It was one of those gray Portland evenings where the rain doesn't crash down, but simply lingers soft, cold, and quiet like an ache you can't name. Olivia sat alone in her car, parked on a side street just outside a cozy bookstore cafe she hadn't stepped into in years. The windshield wipers moved slowly, brushing away the drizzle that blurred everything just enough to match the blur inside her chest. She was 34, married for 9 years, and yet tonight, she felt like a woman unclaimed by anyone, not even herself. Her phone lay face up on the passenger seat, buzzing for the 5th time in 20 minutes. Ethan again, her husband. Man she once believed was her forever. But lately, forever had started to feel like a sentence. Their house in the suburbs had granite countertops to Labradors, and framed pictures of vacations where they both looked happy. But in the quiet, she knew better. Their love had turned into something polite, distant, scheduled. Ethan was never cruel, just distracted. He worked late, kissed her on the cheek out of habit, and asked how her day was without really listening. They shared a bed, but not a heartbeat. It wasn't a big betrayal. No screaming, no slamming doors. It's just slow fading. And in that kind of silence, a woman starts to remember the sound of being truly seen. That's when she saw him. It's just a glimpse at first. A tall man walking through the rain with a worn gray jacket pulled over his head, his pace steady, hands in his pockets like he had nowhere urgent to be, except maybe exactly where she was. Olivia's breath caught before her brain could catch up. It was Noah. Noah Hayes. The name alone hit her like heat in her chest. He hadn't aged the way some people do. He wore time like a good book. Age is soft, but still full of meaning. His beard was a little fuller, his hair darker at the roots, and his eyes, those eyes still had that quiet intensity, like he could see past her words and into the feelings she tried to hide. She hadn't seen him in nearly a decade. Not since the last fight. Not since the day she chose Ethan instead. She remembered how she'd told Noah goodbye on a cold winter morning in Denver, her fingers trembling as she said she needed stability, not fire. Back then, Noah was a dreamer, a painter with calloused hands and a love too big for the small apartment they shared. He didn't have savings or a 5-year plan, but he had a way of touching her face like it was the only truth in his world. Still, she left him for something safer, quieter. And here he was again, stepping into the cafe like some chapter she thought she'd closed, walking right back into the part of her that never really healed. Without thinking, Olivia followed. The bell over the door chimed softly as she walked, in her heart pounding under her coat. The cafe was warm, filled with the soft hum of jazz, the scent of fresh espresso, and that gentle buzz of people talking just low enough to get lost in your own thoughts. She spotted him near the back, peeling off his jacket and shaking out his damp hair. When their eyes met, everything else in the room faded. Noah's lips curled into the kind of smile that says, "I knew we'd meet again." He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her with a kind of calm heartbreak that made her legs feel weak. Finally, he said, "Live." Just that, and it was enough to bring everything rushing back. Every night they spent tangled in each other's arms. Every fight that ended in desperate kisses. Every stupid reason she left. She sat down across from him without asking, like no time had passed. They talked about surface things, jobs, the weather, how much Portland had changed, but the energy between them was electric and aching. Every glance, every accidental brush of hands across the table pulled at something deeper. Then came the silence, the real kind. The kind where neither person wants to say it first, but both are thinking it. "I missed you. I still feel you." Olivia's fingers trembled as they touched his, just for a second. No one watching would have noticed, but to her it felt like falling into something she'd spent years pretending didn't exist. That touch wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder of a love that once set her on fire, of a man who still carried pieces of her. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and soft, like the sky knew this story had only just begun. Asterisk, after the unexpected meeting in the cafe, Olivia felt like she was walking through a fog that was both comforting and confusing. The rain had stopped outside, but inside her chest a storm was raging. Noah's presence stirred up a mix of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope, regret, and something deep and raw she'd tried to bury. Sitting across from him at that small wooden table by the window, she realized how much she had missed the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room worth noticing. Noah's voice was soft but steady. When he spoke, each word carefully chosen, as if he feared breaking the fragile moment between them. He asked about her life, about Ethan, about everything and nothing all at once. Olivia answered honestly but cautiously, because the truth was tangled up in guilt and confusion. She hadn't expected to see Noah again, and now that she had, she wasn't sure what to do with the feelings he stirred inside her. He reminded her of the woman she used to be: bold, passionate, unafraid to want more than comfort and security. She remembered the way his hands used to find hers without asking, the way his smile could light up the darkest days. Oh, here they were, two adults shaped by years apart, sitting close enough that their knees almost touched. The space between them felt electric. Noah reached out and gently brushed a damp strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. That simple touch spoke volumes, saying what words could not. I never stopped caring. I never stopped loving you. Olivia's heart raced, but she kept her gaze steady, afraid if she looked away she might lose herself in the memory of what once was. They talked about small things: the new cafe down the street, a movie they both wanted to see but beneath. Every word was the unsaid question: what if we tried again? As the minutes passed, the noise of the cafe seemed to fade away, replaced by the sound of rain softly tapping the window panes and the quiet thumping of her own pulse. Noah's hand found hers on the table, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if no time had passed since they last held each other. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the warmth of his touch, the way it made her feel seen and desired, in a way Ethan's careful, polite love no longer could. She wanted to reach for him, to bridge the years and the mistakes, to hold on to this moment and never let it go. But reality whispered warnings. She was married. She had made promises. Yet, in this cozy cafe surrounded by strangers who didn't know their story, those promises felt fragile, like they might shatter under the weight of what was happening right now. Noah's voice dropped to a whisper as he leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. I've thought about you every day, he said, even when I knew you were gone. Olivia swallowed hard, the mix of longing and sorrow almost too much to bear. Her fingers tightened around his, afraid that if she let go, this chance to reconnect would slip through her fingers forever. They both knew this wasn't just a casual meeting. 'Twas a turning point. The past was alive between them, filled with all the things they never said: how much they missed each other, how much they hurt, and how much they still wanted to be together. The rain outside started again, gentle at first, then heavier, tapping against the windows like a reminder. That time was moving, that life wasn't waiting for them to figure this out. Olivia looked into Noah's eyes and saw the same storm she felt inside herself: deep, wild, and impossible to ignore. She realized then that this night, this rainy evening, was more than chance. It was an invitation to face the truth of what she wanted, even if it scared her. As the cafe began to close, they stood up slowly, reluctant to end what they had just begun. Noah slipped his hand into the pocket of his jacket and with a quiet smile said, "Maybe we can talk again tomorrow." Olivia nodded, a mix of hope and fear swelling inside her. She didn't know where this path would lead or what heartbreak might follow, but in that moment, all that mattered was the touch of his hand and the promise it held that some loves, no matter how long buried, never truly die. In the days that followed her quiet, rain-soaked reunion with Noah, Olivia found herself drifting through her life like a woman wearing someone else's skin. Everything around her felt familiar, but no longer hers. The mornings began the same. While Ethan would leave early, kissing her on the forehead like a routine, asking if she needed anything, then disappearing into his world of numbers, meetings, and cold professionalism. But Olivia was different now. Something inside her had stirred awake. Her heart beat faster when she thought of Noah. Her chest warmed at the memory of his touch. And her mind replayed his words like a favorite song she hadn't heard in years. Still, she tried to keep it together. She went to work, smiled at the students, made dinner, and folded laundry like always. But everything felt like acting. She could hear her own voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone pretending to be Olivia. In the quiet moments when Ethan wasn't looking, she caught herself staring at her phone, hoping for a message from Noah when it came. Her heart would skip in that reckless, youthful way she hadn't felt since her 20s. One evening, as the sky turned pink outside the kitchen window, Olivia stood at the sink rinsing dishes when Ethan walked in. He leaned against the counter and looked at her a little too carefully. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice calm, but cautious. "Are you okay?" She paused, hands wet, heart racing. "Just tired," she lied. But the lie sat heavy in the air. The truth was, she wasn't tired. She was wide awake, maybe for the first time in years. That night, long after Ethan fell, asleep next to her in bed, Olivia sat in the dark with her phone glowing in her hands. Rereading a simple message from Noah, "Still thinking about you. Wish I could hold your hand right now." Her fingers trembled. She didn't reply right away. She didn't know what was right or wrong anymore. All she knew was that the man sleeping beside her hadn't touched her like that in years. Not emotionally, not physically. The next afternoon, she found herself back in that same cafe with Noah. The tension between them had shifted. Wasn't nervous or unsure anymore. It was familiar, warm, dangerous in the way only something deeply known can be. They didn't talk much at first. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of questions and answers. When he reached across the table and touched her fingers, she didn't pull away. And when he leaned forward and kissed her softly, slowly, as if asking permission, she let him. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was tender, sad, and breathtaking. The kind of kiss that makes you remember who you used to be. She pulled back, lips trembling. "I shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "Maybe not," Noah replied. But it felt real. And that was the problem. It did. Too real. Too honest. That night, Olivia sat in her car parked outside her house, hands gripping the steering wheel like she was afraid to go inside. Ethan was already home, lights on, soft music playing, a wine glass left half full on the counter like always. She walked in slowly, like someone entering a stranger's home. Ethan greeted her with a smile, distracted as usual, telling her about some client drama she couldn't care less about. She nodded, said all the right things. But when she glanced at his phone charging on the counter, something inside her paused. It buzzed once and the screen lit up. A message. One she wasn't meant to see. "Missed you today? Tomorrow, same time." There was a red heart at the end. Her blood ran cold. For a long second, she just stood there staring, unable to blink. The irony burned in her throat. While she'd been battling guilt over a single kiss, Ethan had already crossed a line and stepped far past it. She picked up the phone, hands shaking, and walked quietly into the living room. "Who's Claire?" she asked, her voice flat, calm. Ethan froze. His face went pale. "Live?" he started, but she held up the phone. "You lied first," she said, "so don't pretend to be shocked." There were no screams, no shattered glasses, just the quiet truth unraveling between them. Two people who had stopped choosing each other long ago. Olivia walked upstairs, heart numb, eyes dry. She didn't cry, not yet, because heartbreak didn't come from just betrayal. It came from the realization that the love you gave everything to had died long before either of you admitted it. And now all she could think about was Noah. His hands, his kiss, the way he still saw her like no one else ever did. For the first time in years, she knew exactly where her heart belonged. The only question left was, what would she do with it? Asterisk, the next morning, the house felt like a hotel lobby, silent, cold and filled with people pretending not to know each other. Olivia sat on the edge of their perfectly made bed, still in the robe she wore the night before, her mind buzzing with thoughts she couldn't silence. Downstairs, she could hear Ethan moving around the kitchen like it was any other day opening. The fridge, pouring coffee, checking his emails on his phone like nothing had happened, but everything had changed. The text from Claire still echoed in her mind, that tiny red heart feeling louder than any argument they could have had. Olivia didn't confront him again. Not yet. There was no point in tearing into a man whose heart had already left the building. Instead, she got dressed slowly, ran her fingers through her hair, and stepped outside into the morning light that felt both too bright and too fake. She drove with no destination, the city of Portland passing by in shades of gray and gold. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. For years, she had clung to this marriage like a safety net, believing that stability meant happiness, that security meant love. But now, the truth sat heavy in her chest. They had both checked out a long time ago. The only difference was, she had just found someone who made her feel alive again. And maybe that's what scared her most. She didn't plan to see Noah that day. She didn't even call, but her car took her there like it knew the way on its own. He opened the door to his small studio apartment in the Pearl District. With that same quiet look in his eyes, the one that didn't demand anything from me. Anything from me. Her only waited. "You okay?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. She just stepped in and let the door close behind her. "Kay?" The air between them crackled, thick with everything they hadn't said yet. "Kay?" And then, without hesitation, she reached for him. Their kiss was different this time, longer, deeper, slower. It wasn't about fantasy anymore. It was real. Raw Olivia clung to his shirt like she might disappear without him. Noah wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close until their hearts beat in sync again. They made love with the desperation of two people trying to rewrite time. Two bodies rediscovering the language they used to speak so fluently. His touch was gentle but full of hunger, like he had been starving for this moment. Her skin lit up under his hands. Her breath caught in her throat as he whispered her name like a prayer. And in that bed, wrapped in white sheets and tangled, memories Olivia remembered who she really was. A woman who could feel deeply. A woman who wanted more than routines and fake smiles. Afterward, they lay in silence, their legs intertwined, their breathing slowly settling. Noah brushed his fingers down her bare shoulder and looked into her eyes. "You don't belong in that house anymore," he said. Olivia stared at the ceiling, unsure of how to respond. He was right, but knowing something and acting on it were two very different things. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered. "Everything feels so ... broken." He kissed her forehead. "Maybe broken is better than numb." She didn't reply, but she held on to that sentence like a lifeline. That evening, she went home to a husband who pretended not to see the guilt or maybe the glow on her face. Ethan was on his laptop, sipping wine, scrolling through spreadsheets like she hadn't caught him cheating the night before. The silence between them was now loaded with unspoken truths and quiet exits. Olivia stood in the doorway of the living room for a long moment before she finally spoke. "I know about Claire," she said calmly. Ethan froze, but didn't deny it. He simply closed his laptop and rubbed his eyes like a man too tired to lie. "I guess we both have our secrets," he said. She nodded, and the sadness between them felt heavier than anger ever could. This wasn't war, it was surrender. "I want out," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her for the first time in a long while. "Yeah," he replied, voice barely above a whisper. "Me too." And just like that, the marriage that had been dying in silence finally exhaled its last breath. Olivia packed a bag that night. Not everything's just enough. A few clothes, her laptop, the photo of her and Noah from years ago that she had hidden in the back of a drawer. She didn't cry, not yet. She walked out the front door without looking back, the air outside, cool and clean against her face. When she got to her car, she texted Noah, "I left. I don't know what happens now, but I needed to be honest. I want to start over if you still want me." She stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. Then she closed. Her eyes exhaled slowly and waited for the reply that would either break her heart or finally set it free. Noah's reply came just a few minutes after she hit send, but to Olivia, it felt like hours. Her heart thudded in her chest as she sat in her parked car, engine off, outside a cheap motel near the river. The streetlights made long shadows stretch. Across the dashboard, and the soft hum of passing cars was the only sound in the stillness. Then her phone lit up. "Come to me. I've waited years for this. Whatever happens next, we face it together." She didn't realize she was crying until the tears dripped onto the screen. It wasn't sadness. It was release. That night, in Noah's arms, everything felt different. It wasn't just the passion, which was deep, hungry, relit, was the way he held her afterward, whispering soft words against her shoulder, like he was trying to protect her from all the noise in the world. And she let him. She let him in fully, for the first time in years. They talked for hours in bed about who they had become, about what they had lost and what they still wanted to find. He told her how he had spent the first year after their breakup wondering if he'd ever get the chance to tell her she was the one that got away. Olivia confessed how lonely her marriage had been, how she used to imagine what her life would have looked like if she had chosen him instead. And as the night stretched into early morning, their bodies tangled together like old vines finding each other again. Olivia realized she didn't feel guilt anymore, only peace. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. But real life, as always, waited just outside the door. Over the next week, Olivia began slowly building her new life. She moved into a small apartment not far from downtown, took time off work, and started going to therapy. She didn't rush into anything with Noah, even though he was always close, always ready to hold her hand through the mess. They went on. Quiet dates, coffee in the park, dinners at small restaurants where nobody knew them. Long walks in the rain where they could just exist without judgment. And with every passing day, Olivia felt herself softening, laughing more, sleeping better, touching him like she remembered how. But just as things began to feel almost steady, the past came knocking, literally. It was Ethan. He showed up at her apartment one evening, unannounced, standing in the hallway with a look that was half regret, half resentment. Olivia stood at the door in silence, her hands still on the knob. "I didn't come to fight," he said, voice low. "I came to say I'm sorry for everything, for not seeing you, for letting you slip away." She nodded, unsure what to say. "Claire's gone," he added. "It wasn't anything real, just something to fill the silence. I know that now." Olivia felt her chest tighten, not out of longing, but out of sadness for the years they had wasted pretending everything was fine. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said gently, "and I hope next time you fight harder for it." Ethan looked like he wanted to say more, but instead, he just nodded and left without another word. Olivia closed the door softly behind him and leaned against it, exhaling a weight she didn't know she was still carrying. That night, she told Noah everything. And instead of reacting with jealousy or fear, he simply pulled her into his arms and said, "You don't have to explain anything to me. I trust you." And that simple sentence made her fall even deeper. Trust. Something so rare, so fragile, but he gave it freely. In the following days, their connection grew deeper, not just physically, but emotionally. They talked about the future not in grand, unrealistic ways, but in quiet, meaningful conversations. Where would they live? Could they blend their lives without losing themselves? Did they want kids? Marriage? Olivia didn't have all the answers, but for once, she wasn't afraid to ask the questions. One rainy Sunday, they found themselves back at the same cafe where everything had started again. Sitting by the window, hands clasped across the table, watching the rain blur the world outside, Noah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "This isn't a proposal," he said, smiling nervously, "but it's a promise that I'll be patient with you, that I'll show up every day, that I'll never let you feel invisible again." Olivia unfolded the paper and read the simple words written in his familiar, careful handwriting. And in that moment, with tears in her eyes and his hand in hers, she realized something powerful. Sometimes love doesn't need grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it just needs one rainy evening and a touch that says everything words never could. Asterisk 6 months had passed, but for Olivia, it felt like both a lifetime and just a blink. Life with Noah had settled into something real messy, imperfect, but deeply human. They shared Sunday mornings with coffee and music, cooked dinner together while dancing barefoot in the kitchen, argued over little things like laundry and leftovers, and made up just as passionately under soft sheets and candlelight. There were no illusions between them anymore. They had scars, both old and new, and they didn't try to hide them. Instead, they talked about them, held each other through them, and learned how to love not in spite of the damage, but because of it. Olivia had found a new rhythm in her life. She was still teaching, but now with more presence, more laughter. Her students noticed it, so did her friends. There was a light in her eyes again, one that had been missing for years. She and Ethan had finalized the divorce quietly, without drama or blame. They had both accepted that their chapter was over, and that maybe it never should have been written the way it was. Closure came not from yelling or slamming doors, but from learning to let go with grace. Olivia never imagined she could feel both heartbreak and healing in the same breath, but that's what growth looked like now. One cold evening in late fall, she stood with Noah outside a small cabin they had rented for the weekend in Vermont. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke, and the sky above was thick with stars. They had driven up without a plan, just a desire to escape the noise of the city and hear each other breathe for a while. Noah wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and kissed the top of her head as they stared out over the lake. Frozen at the edges, quiet like a secret. "I used to dream about this," he said softly. "Not just the view, but you, us." Olivia turned to him, eyes glistening. "Me too, but I didn't know if I deserved it." He touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. "You always did. You just forgot for a while." And maybe he was right. Maybe we all forget at some point who we are and what we need. If we get caught in routines, in fear, in trying to keep the peace even when we're drowning. But Olivia had remembered. Not because of a grand revelation, but because one man had looked at her like she was still worth choosing. That night, inside the cabin, as the fire cracked and wind howled gently outside, Noah handed her a small box knot, flashy, not overly dramatic, just simple, honest. Inside was a silver ring, thin, delicate, with a single inscription carved inside. "Even in silence, I hear you." He didn't ask for marriage, not yet. He asked for something more vulnerable, commitment to grow together, to fight for love every day, to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. Olivia's heart swelled in her chest. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a second chance, real, raw, and earned. She slid the ring on her finger and nodded through tears. "Yes," she whispered, "to all of it." Later, as they lay tangled in the warmth of each other's bodies, with skin against skin and no need for words, Olivia realized just how far she had come. From the woman who stayed quiet to keep a peace that never existed, to the woman who now spoke her truth, even if her voice trembled, From being touched out of habit to being touched like a poem. From choosing safe to choosing love. The betrayal she once feared had been the door to her own awakening. And Noah, flawed, patient, steady Noah, had been her reminder that sometimes the past doesn't have to be an anchor. Sometimes it's the map. As dawn crept into the sky and the fire died down, Olivia whispered into the soft space between them, "Thank you for waiting, for believing I'd come back to myself." Noah kissed her shoulder, holding her close. "You never left," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you how to feel again. And maybe that was all any of us ever needed. Not someone to fix us, just someone to sit beside us in the dark until we were ready to turn on the light." In the end, Olivia learned that love isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with perfect timing or clean beginnings. Sometimes it returns on a rainy evening, touches your hand in silence, and says everything words never could. And when it does, you listen not with your ears, but with your heart. Because when love finally feels like home, you don't run from it anymore. You open the door. And you stay.